I like to use the word nutritional ketosis. Ketosis is a buzzword. It's everywhere. First of all, what the heck is it? We're gonna talk about that. But if you don't include the nutritional component of any type of diet that you put into your life, then you're missing the mark. You're definitely missing the mark. And for me, it's super important because I'm looking at health from a cellular level. And so nutrition is a huge part of that. Healthy fat is back, and I'm super excited about this because I love to eat fat. My name is Dr. Michelle Bean. I'm a chiropractor. I live in Santa Cruz, California. So what the heck is keto? What is keto? So ketosis is a metabolic state where your body changes from burning primarily carbohydrates or glucose to burning fat. This is a natural process. This is something that happens in our body. We don't have to force the body to do it, but we can certainly coax it. And ketosis, even though it has a coined terminology, when we use the word ketones or ketosis, ketogenic, this is a process that's been occurring in the human body, in our cells for as long as we've been around, basically. It comes about during times of fasting, prolonged exercise, so when you burn through all of the carbs that you have through exercise, or through low carb intake, so you don't have a lot of carbohydrates and the body switches over to burning fat. Why do we have ketones? So first of all, I didn't tell you what a ketone is. A ketone is when your body switches from burning glucose to burning fats, we get a breakdown of lipids into what's called triglycerides. And these triglycerides can be converted by the liver into little ketone bodies. So a ketone or a ketone body is a breakdown of fatty acids. And it's basically in the form of dietary fats, so ingesting, taking in, consuming dietary fats, or switching over into burning the stored fat that we have in our adipose tissue. So that's what ketones are. And why do we have these ketones? So they call it the feast and famine cycles. And our ancestors didn't have, supermarkets the way we do today. They didn't have access to food 24 hours a day. We have this capacity to store this fat so that when we go into the famine cycles and there's no food around, your body starts breaking down these fats and uses that as fuel. And we have enough fuel in the form of fat in our bodies to sustain us from anywhere between 2, 3, 4 weeks, all the way up to 6, 7, 8, 9 months, depending on who you are. The other brilliant thing about ketones is it prevents the breakdown of protein. So it's protein sparing. And if you think about this, I know people think about fasting because we've been told, or we assume that if we're not consuming carbohydrates, the body's going to turn to our muscle or to protein. And that's not the case. Our ancestors, when they were using fat as fuel and they didn't have sources of carbohydrates, they weren't withering away and they weren't stupid. They were actually very, very aware. So this is the good stuff. Let's talk about it. Cellular metabolism. So when we're talking about making this metabolic shift, what I mean, metabolic shift from burning carbohydrates as fuel to burning fat as fuel, we need to talk about cellular metabolism. So what is it? It is the breakdown of your macronutrients. So it's the breakdown of your food. There's 3 main macronutrients that are able to be broken down and then turned into fuel for the body. And those 3 are carbohydrates. I know you've heard of this, fats, and protein. And these 3, when they're broken down, they create energy in the form of what's called ATP. So that's the main energy source for the body. As long as carbs are running in the body, as long as you have a source of carbohydrates, your body's not going to metabolize fats. It's going to always use carbohydrates. And then protein typically isn't used for an energy source. It can be, but it typically is not. As long as you have carbohydrates, as long as you have fats, there's maybe a short period of time where you might transition into burning a little bit of protein as an energy source, but really your body wants to use it as structures, as part of the structural part of cells, and protein is part of the signaling system of the body. So the body takes in the air that we breathe and the food that we eat, and it breaks it down and it sends it to the mitochondria. So there's another picture of the mitochondria right there. So what happens is we take glucose or we take fatty acids or ketones, and they go through this complex series of chemical reactions inside of the mitochondria. And in the end, what happens is we get this ATP molecule that can be used as an energy source, again, for all of the functions of the body. And along with this ATP, we also get a little bit of heat, we get a little bit of oxygen, and we get, as a natural process of oxidative phosphorylation is what it's called, or as a natural process of cellular metabolism, is reactive oxygen species. So this is also known as, or what creates free radicals. And I'm sure that you've heard of free radicals. Free radicals, we've been talking about them for the past 15 years. We're understanding why free radicals are so damaging to the body, but more than anything, it is the increase in the amount of free radicals that we have been created by consuming a lot of carbohydrates. So what happens is these free radicals, they become reactive. This is the whole point, is they're very reactive. The inflammation that's created by this unchecked free radical damage that's happening within our cells is creating a lot of the diseases that we're seeing in Western society. If you're still constantly burning carbohydrates as your main source of fuel, that means you are creating constantly this upsurge of free radicals in your body, never giving your body a break from this. So the thing with carbohydrates, when you metabolize carbs or glucose, you are creating 2 times more the amount of free radicals than when you metabolize fats, and you're getting half the energy. So it is a very inefficient form of cellular energy. Fatty acids, when you break down fatty acids, your heart and your muscles love fatty acids. If you've ever heard of anybody who has been in ketosis or has fasted, more than 2, maybe 3 or 4 days, you will hear them say that they have this incredible upsurge of energy. And it's because you're getting a lot more energy from metabolizing fats than you are from constantly metabolizing carbohydrates. All right, so free radicals, again, this is the last thing I'll say about free radicals because I think you're getting it. But because of the inflammation that these free radicals are creating in our body, it is associated with so many disease processes. So inflammation is a systemic inflammation that's created because of all the damage to the DNA and to our cell membranes and really to the mitochondria. There are so many health benefits to saturated fat. One of the most important ones, I think, is, of course, the balancing of hormones. If you're somebody who feels like if you skip a meal or it's been too long since you've eaten and you cannot tap into your fat stores as a source of energy because you're not fat adapted, you don't have the metabolic flexibility to switch between the two, then we can start to understand that you might be somebody who has an imbalance in their hormones, because that is the natural way for us, to balance out the bodies, to be able to be flexible in the way that we're metabolizing energy. So how do you do it? All this talk about ketones and ketosis, and all I want to know is how do I become a ketone maker, right? So it may sound pretty simple, but this is in the most simplest way to tell you is reduce the amount of carbohydrates. What you want to do, and protein, because again, protein can, 1, signal insulin, and 2, an excess of protein is going to turn into glucose, which again signals insulin. So the idea is we want to stop signaling so much insulin in the body. But the main way to do this is to reduce the amount of carbohydrates and reduce the amount of protein that you are consuming. Ketones make really, really great energy. Again, it is your brain loves ketones. Your muscles love ketones. The majority of your cells really love ketones, and they're very efficient. And again, this is something that is metabolically natural process in the body. So what is this F word that we're talking about? You've heard me say it several times again, you guys. Nature has a counterbalance to everything, including eating, and that would be not eating. Eating all the time is not normal. It is very common. This is a common practice that we have grown up with, and unless you're somebody who has either a spiritual practice or a religious practice where you practice fasting, then you've probably never done it. Our big brains, of course, have not evolved in spite of fasting, but because we didn't have constant access to food. And again, that is the rise in ketones that happens in the brain. That is a neuroprotective and neuroregenerative. And they also say it is a neurogenesis. You're actually creating new brain cells by burning ketones. There's a long history of fasting, guys. It is the most time-honored, widespread tradition in the world. Every society, every culture, every religion has used fasting on some level. And this is what I was trying to say. As periods of involuntary starvation or fasting faded, ancient cultures replaced them with times of voluntary fasting. We understand on some level that not eating is that counterbalance, right? 3 of the most influential people in the world, Jesus Christ, Buddha, and Muhammad, believed in the healing powers of fasting. Ketogenic and fasting go really well together. What I'm finding is very beneficial is to get people into what's called fat adaptation. So you actually upregulate all of the enzymes that are needed to start breaking down fats and using them as your source of fuel. And it takes time to do that. But when you create a diet and a food supply that promotes that, you become what's called fat adapted, and then it's so much easier in this state to go in and out of fasting mode. And we're going to talk about that. I can show you how to do that. 2016, the Nobel Prize winner is this understanding of autophagy. So autophagy, another word, I know I'm throwing a lot of words at you. You don't have to remember this, but autophagy is a process where your body, your cells, when you stop feeding them, you give them the ability to actually rest and repair. This is a really important process in the body. And what happens is autophagy starts breaking down. It's like a recycling of the cellular structures. All of the parts, the little organelles that we talked about earlier that are no longer efficient, or they're either damaged, they're not working properly, your body has the capacity to go in there and clean them up. So it tears them down. All of the parts are actually used for other parts of the cell, and anything that can't be used is eliminated. And then it starts generating like new mitochondria, protein synthesis. There's a lot of really great things that happen during this time of autophagy. Again, I said it builds more mitochondria. Who doesn't want more healthy, lively, efficient mitochondria? Because that's where we're getting all of the energy for the biological processes of our cells. We need this. Stabilizing, when you're fasting, you're stabilizing blood glucose and insulin. Again, if you're not eating, especially if you're not eating carbohydrates, then you're not spiking insulin. This is one of the quickest ways to lose weight. The misconception is that people think that when you stop eating that you're going to start breaking down protein, but we've already talked about that. What happens is when you get through the glucose, you get through the glycogen, your body's going to go to the fats. That's just what they do. And so what happens is if you're burning fat and you're not eating, you're going to lose weight. It's very, very simple. It might not be a simple process, but there's a lot of ways that we can make it easier for people. One of them is ketosis, and there's a couple of other tricks that we can do so that fasting isn't actually like a big deal. Major anti-cancer effects. There's a guy studying it. One of the guys that I'm following, his name is Thomas Seyfried. His recommendation is that every human who wants to have some kind of a preventative therapy for cancer is to fast a 7 to 14 day fast at least once a year. So tremendous anti-cancer effects, builds lean muscle, again, does not break down muscle, actually builds muscle during these times of fasting. And again, because of the ketones in the brain, major increased focus. Who doesn't want all of that? I certainly do. I've actually been really enjoying my fasting periods. And it's fascinating to not be controlled by my hunger, but actually be able to control hunger. This is one of the main benefits for me that I've noticed. There's different types of fasting. Don't be afraid of the word fasting. There's different ways to do it. There's peak or intermittent fasting. That means you're just fasting during certain time periods of the day, or that also means narrowing the time that you're eating. So it might be anywhere like, 4 to 6 to 7 to 8 hours a day. And then the rest of the time you're fasting. So this is considered intermittent fasting. Some people call it time restricted eating. 34 to 68 hour fasts, and then 7 to 14 day fasts. Alternative day fasting. I'm learning a lot more about the alternative day fasting. There's a water fast and a fat fast. There's different ways to fast. So different ways to do it, and different ways to make it a lot easier, and ways to not trick the body, but continue to feed the body without spiking insulin and without really turning on protein synthesis in the body. And then your body still thinks that it's fasting. Starting to learn how to break down fast. And during this early time of nutritional ketosis is when you start upregulating, you're turning on all of the genes in the body that say, I want to burn fat as fuel, right? The majority of us don't have those enzymes in constant flux because we've never done this. We have all of the ones that are associated with carbohydrates. We have all the ones that are associated with fat storage. We have all the ones that are associated, with breaking down of carbohydrates. We don't have the ones, although we have the genes and we have the ability to, we don't have the switch turned on. So during this early stages of nutritional ketosis, the idea is to, one, burn ketones, start burning fat, supply the body with healthy fat so that you can start breaking those down, reduce the amount of carbohydrates in the diet, so that your body will start upregulating all these enzymes, and then you can start getting into this fat burning machine that you are designed to be. Thank you for listening. And again, I hope you got some really great information out of this.